Okay, again, welcome to today's webinar provided by Solar Plaza as a prequel for our PV trade mission in Mexico that will take place in March in Mexico City. In the coming hour, we will learn a lot more about the potential of solar in Mexico, by many considered as Latin America's most attractive PV market. My name is Tom van Dorp. I'm at Solar Plaza since 2010 and currently responsible for our upcoming trade mission conference in Mexico. To give you an idea about what to expect in the coming hour, I will quickly run with you through today's schedule. If correct, you can see my screen, and there is the agenda appearing now. First of all, I will be moderating this session, and in a minute I will give you a short introduction of our company, Solar Plaza, and our upcoming event in Mexico. Today's first speaker will be John Padilla from IPD Latin America. He will share his perspective on Mexico's energy reform and its impact on renewables. Thereafter, Adam James from GTM Research will tell you more about drivers and opportunities for the Mexican PV market. And before we will start with a panel discussion, Hector Olea from Gauss Energy will give a 2-minute introduction on his involvement in the Our Solar project, with 39 megawatts currently the biggest PV project in Latin America. The session is expecting to come to an end in about 1 hour. And I want to share a few practical notes with you first. The sheets of the presentation will be available for download afterwards. You can, of course, ask your questions at any point throughout the webinar. There is a chat box at the right of your screen, and there will be time for questions after every speech. And in the panel discussion at the end, we will address further questions. We have a lot of attendees at the moment in the session, so we may not be able to address all questions, but any unanswered questions can still be directed to us. Of course, we will try to cover as many questions as we can. And also, if you have any technical problems, don't hesitate to drop your issues in the chat box. There is a technical support desk available at the moment, so they will try to help you to solve your problems immediately, and they will chat back to you directly. About Solar Plaza, I assume most of the people here in the webinar know our company since you received the invitation for this webinar, but a few highlights. The company is founded in 2004. Our mission is that we want to empower professionals in solar business development by building the most valuable solar PV network. So basically we are an information platform. There is a lot of information to find on our website. We have a daily Sun newsletter as well, for which you can subscribe freely. And yeah, our main activity is organization of conferences and trade missions to support you in building your business. Yeah, we organize a lot of events. In the past years, we have organized over 50 events all around the world. Basically, every continent we have been. And yeah, we're working on a lot of new events for this year as well. I will tell you more about that later on. Yeah, for Mexico, why do we organize a trade mission? That is a common question that people are asking. What are the big benefits of joining a trade mission? Well, we have organized solar PV trade missions to China, India, Taiwan, USA, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, and Indonesia, and also lately in Saudi Arabia. And we've become kind of huge believers in the value of taking a group of international business-minded people to get hands-on in the field, no-nonsense taste of a potentially interested market like Mexico. And yeah, we've defined 5 key arguments for people to join a trade mission like this. These are also shown on the screen now. Yeah, first of all, you get a real feel of the country. You get to meet the local experts, key stakeholders and decision makers, all face-to-face in dedicated meetings, most of them on the offices of those stakeholders. So you will learn all there is to know about the solar market at the source. And highly important, of course, you will connect with the local industry. And people often underestimate the value of the group with who you're traveling for a whole week. Don't forget, it's not only about who you're visiting and meeting with, but also who you are traveling with. These are all like-minded professionals that are looking to start or expand their businesses in the same market as you are. So on the next slide, you see a few testimonials of people that have attended before. I won't stop too long at this slide, but you can read them afterwards. If you want to hear more from other attendees, just contact me. Yeah, I will quickly scroll down to the program of the week that we have now in Mexico. It's a 5-day program where we have several meetings. We will stay in the Hilton Mexico City Reforma hotel for the whole week, and yeah, travel from there. The first day will be a very good introduction into doing business in Mexico. We will be discussing challenges and opportunities of solar PV in Mexico, and we'll dive also into project development issues. Second day is an important day, of course, with meetings with government bodies like Center, CEV, and CRE. We will also have a meeting with an EPC and do a plant visit in Mexico City. Other key thing is, of course, the third day is a financing workshop. Financing remains an issue in Mexico with project development, and yeah, of course, we're going to dive into that. And yeah, another very important highlight is the full day conference, on which 100+ high-level participants from the Mexican industry will join us as a trade mission group. And yeah, expert speakers will run you through the market as well. And it's a great way to yeah, start your network and expand your network in the local market, where a lot of new companies are coming in each day now. And we will start with a summary and kind of SWOT analysis on the last day. Okay, a few companies that are already joining as participants on the trade mission on this sheet. Yeah, you can have a look on that later on as well. I'm going to announce the first speaker, which is John Padilla. John is a partner and managing director of IPD Latin America. It's a US-based independent energy consultancy specializing in the above the ground risk in the oil, electricity, and gas industries in Latin America. John is currently based in Bogota in Colombia, but traveling to Mexico frequently, and he directs a range of consulting efforts at IPD, including recent its due diligence practice, forecasting, and other strategic client-oriented efforts. Today he will share his insights in the Mexican energy reform and the impact of that on the renewable sector. John, I would say please go ahead with sharing us your perspective on these crucial developments. I'm going to unmute you now and going to make you presenter so you can share your screen with us.
Fantastic. Good morning. Pleasure to be with all of you. Greetings from Mexico City, and for anybody that has been watching news here over the last couple of months, it is a daily litany of changes and activity that are taking place. Reform of the energy sector historically was passed in early December, and it took, I think, everybody in the sector by unbelievable surprise in terms of how quickly it was implemented. It was the first phase of the reform, and you know, much of the nitty-gritty is now what we're in the process of doing. I think the constitutional energy reform that was published on December 20th probably answered or created as many questions as it has answered at this stage. So I think particularly it's quite timely here to talk about on the electricity side what its impact is going to be on renewables. Renewables has been an area that has certainly been growing. There's a lot of interest in it, but I'll get into a little bit of a discussion in terms of what we're likely to see, and some of the things that we're already starting to observe and witness in terms of people positioning themselves, etc. So just very quickly, I've just got essentially 3 slides here that I want to walk through. One is the timeline, the new structure that's being created, and then really kind of talk about how renewables are going to be affected by the energy reform. So as I said, right here on December 20th, the energy reform was published. That made it official. December 10th, it was passed by the Senate, and then was very quickly passed by the lower house and published on the 20th. Last night, we also had a major announcement in the sector. Enrique Ochoa, who was the Undersecretary of Hydrocarbons, was named the new CFE General Director. And in his place, Lourdes Melgar, who was the Undersecretary of Electricity, and someone that would certainly, that position would be very relevant to many of the folks that are on this call. She will be the new Undersecretary of Hydrocarbons, a individual who was in charge of judicial matters, Cesar Emiliano Hernandez will be the new Undersecretary of Electricity. So we're already starting to see some pretty significant moves in the sector, and this is only the start. So I think we've, with the oil and gas sector, I mean, this is 75 years of breaking up a monopoly, and in the case of electricity, this is over 50 years. So these are major shifts. A lot of people have expected that this will take quite a bit of time, but I think what is interesting to understand and appreciate is that the administration needs quick wins, and they're looking to move this process forward extremely quickly. Secondary legislation is supposed to be passed here by April 21st, and so as you can see here, there's on the screen, there's several dates that relate to the implementation of secondary legislation. Originally, there was 29 laws that needed to be passed. We're now of the understanding that 32 laws will have to be passed. This is a tremendous amount of workload. But what's interesting is that most of this appears to have already been, in large part, pre-negotiated during the process, and the expectation as Congress reconvened here in this week is that we'll quickly see a legislative proposal that is going to be introduced. So, despite the naysayers, this is an extremely ambitious schedule. But there's tremendous amount of incentives and pressure to get this done. So if today's announcement is any indication, we're going to just continue to see a very, very fast process. And I think the trade mission that Solar Plaza is putting on is certainly quite timely. Timing is everything, and sometimes you get lucky, and it's great timing. So. I think over the next month, 2 months, we're going to see some very significant activities. I've highlighted here items that we view as in red, the items that are going to be probably most critical and of interest to individuals that are in the renewable sector. And then other items here in green, which are probably a little less important, but nonetheless things to keep your eye on. In particular, I would say that this, the new state productive companies, the definition of that is supposed to come out as part of the secondary legislation, and so that is one item that will then certainly define what exactly CFE as well as PEMEX are expected to be. It's an undefined term right now, but that will absolutely dictate how it's going to be moving forward. For those that are unaware, CFE will retain transmission and distribution, and generation then will be moved into a wholesale market. So that's under the new SENACE, which is down here, and the new SENACE is not supposed to be implemented basically until April of 2015. But there's many steps before that have to take place, and we'll start to get a very, very clear view of what the new market is going to look like before that. So in particular, the laws regarding the electric industry will be quite important. The ones that I would say that you need to kind of keep your eyes out for is with respect to how they're going to undertake transmission and distribution permits. That'll be important, particularly as private sector entities will be able to apply to secure both of those type of permits, and they could connect to remote areas in the country that perhaps are not connected with gas, and to undertake a renewable project such as the one that Hector Olea will talk to us about later in the webcast. The other item is really a description of how generation is going to be regulated. So that will start to dictate what we're going to see in terms of SENACE, and how the wholesale market will work. And obviously, the way that the wholesale market is going to work is going to have massive, massive implications and define where renewables kind of stack up in the whole mix going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about incentives in a little bit more detail. And then the other item to kind of keep your eye out on is going to be the definition. We expect to see more definition on renewables. So the last administration had come out and put out some goals that I'll talk about in a minute with respect to renewables. The new administration has actually accepted those goals, and part of the discussion, as we'll talk about, is really kind of revolving around incentives, subsidies, which is something they're trying to get rid of, and how that's going to really impact everything kind of going forward. The one thing I would note is that there's a new environmental regulator. This is for upstream and SEPA. It will be attached to the environmental undersecretary or ministry here, which is SEMRNAT. I only mention it because there could be some situations where, particularly with gas, that will have an impact, and it will be something that you would potentially want to take a look at. All right. So new structure. The new structure of what we have here on a go-forward basis is that with respect to CFE, as I mentioned, SENACE will now essentially become the control center, and CFE will have generation, and there's big questions in the market as to what will exactly happen with that generation. There's been a very significant IPP market which has constructed low-cost electricity. Most of that is all natural gas fired, but the question is there's a lot of old generation that CFE has that's either fuel oil fired or just single cycle and not very efficient. There's been no talk of privatization, but I think from a political perspective, it's going to be very, very important to understand your key stakeholders, who's who, and how things are moving forward, because that's going to probably dictate a lot of what happens. And if you're looking at like quick wins and the need that the government has to get those, I mean, one of the things that we would say is that with that old generation, is CFE going to have the money or be provided the money to upgrade those facilities? And if not, one of the best things would actually be in contrast to what has been said with respect to the reform, is to potentially bundle some of those assets and sell them because they're prime real estate locations that are connected to the grid. Whether that happens or not, I think is all pure speculation. There's tremendous amounts of speculation going on right now in the market, but it's important to kind of put in context and understand. The SENACE, as it stands right now, exists. It's under the guise of the CFE. It is now going to be separated out, and it'll be a fully independent entity. So again, the rules of the game will certainly still need to be defined, and that's going to have a big that'll define really where we're going in terms of the sector, financing, how projects are going to get financed. The IPPs to date have been project financing, and they've been able to secure very highly leveraged positions. That will probably not be the case going forward, but again, we'll have to see how that goes. Last item here before I turn it over is just really with respect to how renewables are going to be affected with respect to the energy reform. And this again, I think kind of gets to the concept of we have as many questions right now as there are answers, and this I think really revolves with respect to renewables around how are renewables going to be incentivized under a wholesale market. The big discussion in Mexico leading up to the reform has been the cheap gas that the U.S. has, and and the very, very expensive imports that Mexico has had to bring in via LNG through the Manzanillo terminal, and essentially trying to now stimulate both domestic production as well as the ability to bring more cross-border pipelines. So gas is certainly the quickest way, but I think there's also concern about being too dependent on any one fuel source. And so the last administration had come out with targets of 35% renewables by 2024. Now, you have to be a little bit careful with those numbers because what they include in those is hydroelectric, and they also include nuclear. But on a go-forward basis, if you take out hydroelectric and nuclear, that's about 21% of that 35% mix. The big question is they have a chunk which is about 8.2% of that 35%, which they kind of leave as undefined. And so the question is what is it that Mexico is going to do in terms of maintaining existing incentives that exist in the market, and or kind of reformatting them. This administration is unlikely to look to undertake direct subsidies, and I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to actually eliminate subsidies. They've done that now with both natural gas as well as LPG, and those are now very, very close to U.S. Reference prices. So I've listed here some of essentially the incentive programs that Mexico currently has, and it's a big question as to kind of how that's all going to work. So as I said, the secondary legislation that we're likely to see within the next 2 to 4 weeks, I would say, is going to help clarify and define some of that activity. And just to kind of put this in context, what we put over here on the right is just the average residential rates in the U.S. I'm sure many of you probably already have a much more fundamental understanding of this, but on average, when you do kind of average rates of the U.S. versus Mexico, Mexico is already at the residential level paying something like 24% less than the average U.S. rates. You can see the kind of tiered scheme that you have in Mexico, and then where some interesting opportunities, particularly for solar, have been is displacing these users, residential users that fall into the DAC category when you're paying nearly 30 cents a kilowatt hour. So those are big questions, I think, from the residential side. From the wholesale market side, I mean, by our calculations, roughly about 40% of the country's electricity capacity, as I was mentioning before, is old and inefficient technology, and that could absolutely be displaced in the wholesale market. So, we're already seeing, I think there was something like 40 permits this last year, as people are starting to speculate. They're buying land, close to transmission lines and strategic locations, and our expectation is that that's only going to increase. And the last item that I would just mention is that there was a financial reform that was also approved here and put into law here in January, and that is going to increase the amount of development bank funding in the market. And as many of you may know, multilateral money right now is brought in, and then it's redistributed through development banks. The question, which is still not answered, is whether those increases in monies will then be made available to renewable projects. Nafinsa, which is one of the development banks here in Mexico, has been touting and stating that it's going to fund a renewable project or a solar project, and and to date it still hasn't done it. So the expectation would be that it will, but we're still that'll be a big item to take a look at. But financing, I think, is going to be changing quite radically, and we're going to have to take a look and see how that all materializes. And with that, I'll turn it back to Tom. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John. I would say give him an applause, but that will we have to wait for that until the conference. I have to mention that all the three speakers of today's session will be involved as speaker as well in the conference. So thanks for this well, very good overview about the impact of the reform. Things are becoming clear already, and then, as you say, in the coming weeks, more certainty will come on this field. I will. Give time for one question now. It's a question from Jason Fromberg. What is the CFE's outlook towards the Pequeñas Productor program? Will they remain committed to purchasing power from those projects?
I'm sorry, from the which program? I missed what...
Pequeñas Productor program.
Okay. Well,
sorry,
I mean, I think that... No. I think that this is all part of the unknowns, because CFE is no longer going to be managing this system going forward. I mean, even if you take a look at, let's start with the large projects with IPPs. I mean, the expectation is those contracts will likely be canceled. Now, for them, it will be as big of a deal because they're probably some of the lowest cost producers in the market. But the question is will Senase adopt the existing programs? I mean, if you take a look at all those incentives, everything from lower transport tariffs to a range of different things, I think that the deductions that you have in terms of income tax, there's a whole slew of items, and all those things are up for grabs right now. So there's no certainty, I would say, at this stage. I think the expectation is that you've got to look at this from a macro perspective at this point, and just understand that there's a clear interest to continue to support renewables, but the details are going to be what's matter, or what's going to matter, and everything else at this stage is just speculation.
Okay, so more about that on the conference. Thanks a lot, John. I'm going to introduce the next speaker, which is Adam James. Adam James is a solar analyst with GTM Research, the market research and consulting arm of Greentech Media. He is leading GTM's coverage on downstream global market and has developed the company's specialized quarterly coverage of the Latin America region. GTM recently published their Latin America PV Playbook, which is considered as the most comprehensive analysis available of the Latin American solar market. So based on that, he will discuss the drivers and opportunities for the Mexican PV market with us today. So Adam, thanks for joining us, and I would say the word is yours, so you can start with your presentation.
Thanks very much, Tom, and thank you, John. That was a great presentation. And I think just to drive home kind of one of the last things that John said there, this is a real time of uncertainty for the renewable industry, and so this conference is both very timely, but also I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and hopefully we can start pointing people in the right direction, but a lot more will kind of become clear over the next year or two. Just let me pull this up here. So as Tom said, my name is Adam James, and I'm a solar analyst with GTM Research. So I lead our downstream global markets coverage with a special focus on Latin America PV development. Just a few words about GTM Research. We're the market research and consulting division of Greentech Media, for those of you who have seen our blog or read our blog. We write a variety of reports on topics throughout the solar value chain. We have annual subscription-based services, and we also do occasional consulting projects. And the Latin America PV Playbook, which is our newest release and our newest product, comes out every quarter and gives strategic insight into the fundamentals and competitive landscape in the Latin America region. And so I'd encourage everybody to take a look at that on our website. So I have a few slides here, and I feel like it's helpful before really diving into the Mexican market in particular to talk about some of the global context, because I think that there's a variety of global trends that are making the Mexican market more interesting for developers and also for upstream companies. And so the two interrelated changes that are underway in global markets are in regards to both the number of markets that are available to PV and the nature of those markets. So we're seeing that demand is being diffused throughout more markets globally than has ever been the case before. So just, for example, in the not-so-distant past, Europe has constituted about 80% of global demand, and now we're moving into a future where about 75% of demand globally is divided between two regions, Europe and Asia Pacific, and the remaining 25% is spread throughout the globe. So this is a result of stronger fundamentals for photovoltaics in more places, and also the migration of companies away from Europe as the incentives have kind of wound down there. So there's more markets available to solar companies than ever before. The other change is in the nature of these new markets, though, and this is where I think Mexico becomes particularly interesting, because more of these markets than ever before are sustainable or capable of supporting solar development without subsidies. And Latin America as a region, and Mexico in particular, is kind of at the very forefront of this sustainable markets trend. For Mexico, you have high insulation, supportive regulations, a strong local labor base, falling system costs, which they're benefiting from, and also in select cases, high retail power prices and high marginal power prices or marginal wholesale power prices that combined kind of make it one of the most mature and attractive sustainable markets in the world to date. So tapping into these kinds of markets requires different business models than what we've seen work in incentive-based markets like Europe in the past. So although we're seeing these sustainable markets grow, they kind of tend to grow steadily rather than booming overnight. So for this reason, I think there's a lot of companies who are getting more and more interested in moving into the Mexican market. So that said, let's just take a closer look at Mexico in particular. So as I said, there's a variety of factors that make Mexico an attractive place for solar development. The basic dynamics of the grid, so rising demand, the need for private investment, and examples of high power prices both on the wholesale and retail side create an environment where solar capacity is incredibly valuable. There's a supportive market and policy atmosphere, which is definitely going to change given energy reform, but as John said, it'll likely change in a positive way for renewable development generally. And so there's a few things in place already that solar can take advantage of, including accelerated depreciation, interconnection contracts like net metering and the energy bank. There's low wheeling charges for moving power that's produced in one place and consumed in another, and also several different tracks for developing solar that we'll explore a little bit more in a minute. And lastly, the insulation levels in the country are just very high compared to other developed countries. So it's between 5 and 7 kilowatt hours per square meter per day in most parts of the country. And there's especially high insulation in the northern and western parts of Mexico. And so combined with falling system costs, which are not unique to Mexico, but Mexico is certainly benefiting from, you have the potential for higher system outputs in general. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here just due to time constraints, but I do want to give you an overview of just the different kinds of ways that you can develop solar in Mexico. And again, I'd encourage you to check out the Latin America PV Playbook and also the Solar Plaza Conference in March if you want more details on how this works. But suffice it to say, there's a range of opportunities to develop solar based both on the project size and on who your off-taker is. Historically, because CFE has been the sole utility and competitive direct sales have not been allowed, there's been a few models that have emerged if you want to develop renewable power. And the two broad categories are basically to build self-supply projects or to develop utility-scale power that you can sell to CFE. So one thing that's important to mention here is that the self-supply model, that over 500 kilowatt bucket, can have multiple off-takers and can produce power in one place and consume it in another. So in other words, these projects can be quite large and sited further away from where demand is and pay low wheeling charges to move the power from one place to another. And we see that as being one of the business models that contains a lot of potential for development, both in 2014 and further on. So putting aside the fundamentals for a second, I think it's worth taking a few minutes just to review where the Mexican market is today and kind of how we got here. So 2012 was really when we think the market first started heating up, although there had been a lot of off-grid solar development prior to that point. 2012 was when we saw the under 500 kilowatt grid-tied market begin to really grow at a steady pace, and it accounted for about 6.2 megawatts that year. CFE started exploring utility-scale solar for the first time and built a 1 megawatt and a 5 megawatt plant. And also one of the biggest self-supply projects up to that point came online, which was the 1.2 megawatt project at ABB's facilities. So against that backdrop, even though 2012 was when the market started heating up, I think 2013 was really a breakthrough year. The distributed market as a whole reached about 25 megawatts. Could be a little lower, could be a little higher. We're waiting on final figures. But what we do know is that the over 500 kilowatt portion of that market started registering a lot more interest from companies, municipalities, and so on. We also saw the 30 megawatt Aura 1 project commissioned, and which we're going to hear about hopefully a little bit later on, which is not only the largest solar project in Mexico, but also is a real indication of the potential for large-scale, unsubsidized PV development, since that project receives price-competitive compensation from the open wholesale market. And as I mentioned earlier, this is in some ways a watershed project, not just for Mexico, but also just for the global PV market, because it's one of the first projects of its kind. And so, looking back over 2012 and 2013, a few of the key trends that we've seen up to this point is that the under 500 kilowatt market is growing rapidly quarter over quarter, and we see that trend only continuing with more competition as installers, start popping up in the market, as consumers get more market education, and also with increased access to things like financing and leasing systems for residential and commercial solar. The over 500 kilowatt self-supply market has also been growing steadily. And as I mentioned, a lot of those projects have been restricted to single companies who are putting large-scale projects together. But we see there being a huge potential upside as that business model gets refined, and as companies learn how to aggregate off-takers and develop, plus megawatt size projects. There's also the potential for merchant projects, or quasi-merchant projects, depending on how you define it, similar to Aura 1. And so those would be projects between 1 and 30 megawatts at select sites throughout Mexico. There's been a sizable pipeline of those projects that have already been approved by CRE, and I'll talk about kind of how we see the future of those projects panning out. So 2014 and beyond, where are we going this year? So GTM forecasts the market at 240 megawatts this year. I think that based on past experience with being in a market research firm, I think it's important to understand that the bottom line number for these forecasts is actually much less important and less useful to most people than understanding what the rationale is behind that forecast and where GTM sees the upside and downside risks in terms of what factors are contributing to that number. So I think I'm going to just go through a brief overview of those two things. So the main things we see driving the market, we think the self-consumption market will continue to grow. For that portion of the self-consumption market that's under 500 kilowatts, the combination of net metering, the high consumption rate tiers such as DAC, and the increased availability of financing will kind of be the key drivers. I think this is a place where we could actually be surprised to the upside in 2014 with more installations than I projected when I was putting together our forecast. Put another way, I think that the portion of our forecast that refers to the under 500 kilowatt market is pretty conservative. The self-supply market, so for over 500 kilowatt projects, we also think has a lot of promise. As I said, the potential to bundle off-takers, including companies or municipalities, for taking power from a large development that's sited in a high installation area in the north, wheeling power down to consumers. There's the potential for that kind of business model to scale rapidly. Again, that depends on the availability of financing. It depends a lot on market education. It's more difficult to get several off-takers together than it is to get one. But we do think that has a lot of potential. And again, that's an area where we were very conservative, I think, in our forecast for 2014. So 2014, in terms of that portion of the self-supply market, we see as being more about refining the business model and getting a few pilots together rather than opening the floodgates. But lastly, utility scale projects are kind of the wild card, I think. I don't expect the IPP market to play a large role for solar, although energy reform could potentially open that market up later on, as John said. Building projects under the small power producer program, so that would be the projects that are between 1 and 30 megawatts, and those would be selling power at about 98% of the marginal price at the node where they connect, is where I think that we could see a lot of growth relatively quickly. This is where there's some downside risk, I believe, and it's mainly because these projects are exposed to commodity risk, and I think that the number of viable sites for those kinds of projects is pretty limited. So there's a potential for the Aura 1 project to be the exception rather than the rule, but there are a lot of these projects that are in the pipeline, and some of them we do think are viable. So although it's unclear about whether or not developers can make those projects work, I think that's an area where we're optimistic in 2014, and we think a few of those will go forward. But there is the potential for that portion of the market to underperform this year. And last point here, I think, would just be that if you look at our forecast going out a few years, one of the key trends that we see panning out is that the large self-supply market will become more attractive than the small power producer market. And I think a lot of that will just come from the fact that you can, under the self-supply model, you can aggregate several off-takers together and get fixed price contracts, whereas the potential for those merchant power projects under the Small Power Producers Program will have a lot more uncertainty, and there's less visibility once you start looking past 5, 6, 7 years out. And in terms of what will be the most attractive for financing, I think that once those kind of low-hanging fruit viable sites are picked for the merchant projects, that less and less of those projects will be worth it for financiers moving into the space. So I think just given time, and I know we want to take some time for questions here at the end, I think I'll stop there, but I want to thank Solar Plaza again for putting this event on. I'm definitely looking forward to the conference in March, and I also encourage all of you to check out the Latin America PV Playbook on GTM's website. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Adam, for your contribution. Thanks for muting yourself. I'm echoing. Yeah, so great, very clear overview about the opportunities, I guess, for the short term and the longer term. I wanted to leave questions for later on, and then go directly through with the introduction of Hector Elia. One note: feel still free to ask questions. I might discourage you at the start by saying that we have a lot of attendees. But we will still leave time for Q&A. So if you have questions, please ask them by the chat box, and we will certainly address some of these. And let me go on with the introduction of Hector. Hector Elia, he has 20 years of experience in the Mexican energy sector. He has actively participated in the promotion and development of renewable energies in the country. Since 2004, Hector Elia is president and CEO of Gauss Energy, which is a business development firm specialized in the Mexican energy sector. Gauss activities are focused on the identification, development, and structuring of investment opportunities in renewable energy projects, which accounts for more than $500 million in greenfield projects. Currently, Gauss operates the Aura Solar project, the largest photovoltaic project in Latin America, and the first utility-scale solar facility in Mexico, with in total 39 megawatts. So Hector will introduce himself in a few minutes before we will start with some discussion. So Hector, go ahead with your introduction.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think you already followed the presentation, so nothing much to add. Gauss is a business development firm, very much focused on the renewable energy, and lately very focused on PV solar development. We have 10 years, we have been in the market since 2004, and looking very optimistic into the future with this energy reform in Mexico. As you mentioned also, Tom, we have operating since September, last September, that the Aura Solar facility entered into commercial operation. I think is the next slide. Tom? Yeah, there we go. The Aura Solar project is as you mentioned, the first utility scale in Mexico. Is sited in La Paz, Baja California Sur, and we have as the only off-taker CFE under the small production regime. This is a project that was financed by the IFC and Nacional Financiera, NAFI, under a very unique conditions, I would say, in Latin America, where we have a big component of a merchant risk in our project. CFE, as you know, under small production regime, pays the project or the energy that offtakes under the CTCP concept, which is the price, the marginal price of the generator for CFE. So we are pleased with this approach. CFE has been paying, I have to say, on time and fully the amount that the invoices in September. We have had 4 cycles of invoicing to CFE, and everything has been paid according to plan. So we're very happy with the way that the project has been moving on. Perhaps we will have more questions on the project later on or during the conference in March. But let me go back with some comments by John and Adam, and really stress the comments they have already mentioned. Let me just stress that with this energy reform in last December has been a game changer in how development projects have been or are being taken from September to this year. We have to be very careful of the timing of reforms. I think the administration has been very optimistic on the timing and moving forward with the reforms, especially with the secondary regulation, which is okay, and I think it's very challenging, but it will be achievable. But it's not only about the secondary regulations. We have more laws to change, or new laws that will come up. We need bypass laws or regulations, reglamentos we call it, or directives that has to be come in place in order to have a full-fledged regulatory system that will allow to new projects enter into a more formal development process. So I think John was mentioning about 2 years to complete all that process, 2 years and a half. I think that's a very realistic time frame. I don't think that all developers will wait until the full-fledged regulatory system will be in place, but I don't think that responsible developers will move into a more formal development stage without having at least some sort of a good idea of the new regulatory system that will be in place perhaps during this year at least. On the structure of the market, let me comment that it's nice to have a bilateral contract system that is being proposed in the December constitutional change, along with the spot market. That's the two features. I think it's a move in the right direction. But also we have to consider that still CFE or the authorities is not deciding, or I don't see CFE being dismantling at this point in time. So I don't see how a spot market will be viable with such a big elephant in the room. So unless we have more participants or serious participants in the buying and in selling of energy, I don't see how a spot market will be a reality in the short, middle term in Mexico. Perhaps in the short term, we'll see a more CTCP type of pricing in that spot market instead of a real price competition in that market. So that's something to be seen. I don't really sure what's going to happen in that term, especially in the short term, in the mid-term time frames. With respect to the renewable market, renewable energy framework, regulatory framework, we so far have a very good regulation that allow large development, especially in wind and mini hydro, with the energy bank, the willing fees being very competitive, capacity recognitions, capacity payment recognitions in that framework. We have to see whether that regulatory framework will be there in the future with the new regulation once taking place. That's something that I'm not sure whether that will happen or how it is going to manage all that preferential regulation that we have for the renewable energy sector. Certainly, no direct subsidies are in the horizon. Has not been the case in the past, and I'm sure it will not be the case into the future. But whether we're going to see those energy bank features, the very competitive willing charges, that's something we will see, that we'll have to wait and see. So far, we know that the willing charge has been, or is in the process of being reviewed in the energy ministry. And I'm sure those willing charges will go up and not down. or not stay the same. So that's something to be seen in the short term. Also, something to be very keen to see what happens is that the CRE is in the process of coming up with a PV solar code to work with the SENACE and what are the rules to be or the interaction with the SENACE and the utility scale solar facilities into the future. That's something to be seen in the next months. Finally, I have to send a caution note on remarks by Adam in terms of trying to come up with bilateral contract with the municipality and states. That has to be taken in a more serious perspective and see whether that's a bankable solution even into the future and with the new regulation. I think that would be my comments, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Hector. This was a very valuable addition to what the other speakers already mentioned. I have a few questions. I will start with an easy one. You were commenting already on Adam, and Adam was also stating that he expects the market to grow to about 240 megawatt of installed capacity at the end of 2014. What are your expectations for the growth of the Mexican market? Are these in line with Adam's statement, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's conservative. We have around by the end of this decade, we have an estimate of 2 gigawatts of new capacity for PV. That was last year prediction. I don't know how that number will change due to the wait and see that we have to or we need to take until the full regulation for renewables is in place again. So I think the 2 gigawatts by the end of the decade is still achievable, but in the short run we want to see an attitude of a more wait and see perspective for that to happen.
But still, would you recommend companies that are not yet in the market to start doing business now and setting up a network, or would you recommend them just wait another few months, or?
No, definitely. I think the name of the game right now is an early position strategy. People start. It has a very good. We have a very good expectation that things will happen. I think the bottom line of what we're going to see is what we have. So everything that we expect is going in the right direction. So I think Mexico it has the expectation that it's going to be a very good market in the future. The only thing is that we have to wait till the regulation is fully. At least we have a good indications of what the regulation is going to look. So I don't see during this year at least a gain in terms of establishing new projects. Projects are being discussed and it will move on paper, but I don't see that real development work will be observed on site, starting constructions or putting up panels on site. Rather, I will see more position of companies into coming into Mexico, establishing to Mexico, getting joint ventures with other Mexican participants. So we will see a more participant position in place rather than project-based activity like it was last year.
Okay, thank you. I have a critical question from Jorge Melero. He is also one of the people involved, and ATA is also a sponsor of our event. But he is asking, what do you think are the changes of the CRE grid code for PV being approved as it is? He is stating that the requirement of storage would kill the market.
Yeah, you're right. Well, you have to understand where that first proposal came out. CFE. The CRE asked CFE to present a proposal. They did, and you have to understand that CFE is utility, and they have to go all the way to preserve all the technical requirements they like to see. But that's a proposal coming from the utility and expected to be quite aggressive. Now the CREs are taking comment from the industry, and we will see a more moderate proposal or final version of that grid code in the coming months. I don't see the CRE getting into a grid code document where prima facie kills all the projects at the beginning. So we will see something more moderate that preserves some of the concerns by CFE, but makes economic sense for the rest of the industry.
Okay, thank you very much, Hector. I have a question for Adam. The question is, please address more specifically the challenges of the multiple off-taker model. Is it simply a contractual challenge to work out with the off-takers, or is it a set of CFE-related challenges, for example, wheeling contracts?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, I mean, I would agree with Hector's kind of caution around whether or not those projects are bankable. I mean, the issue is that to develop those self-supply contracts, you have to start, at least under the current regulatory scheme, you have to start another company that each of the participants are bought into, so that they technically own the power that's being produced. And then separately, you have contracts for the power, that fixes a price that they consume that power at. So I think that part of the issue is just that, one, there's the biggest barrier that I see is just the market education component of this. So with each individual off-taker, you have to have a certain level of understanding about how solar power functions and what the market looks like. Then you have a challenge around how the project is actually paid for and financed. And I think that also depends on how the contracts are structured and what the rates are that power is being sold for and how you set up that company that technically owns the project. So there's a kind of a financing or equity challenge there. And then lastly, I mean, there's just the question of what is going to happen with kind of, are there going to be kind of retail rate impacts from energy reform in the future that are going to change the structure under which some of these folks consume power. And so I think that that's the last key challenge. And really some of this is just that the business models that currently exist in Mexico have not necessarily been designed to take advantage of that program to its fullest potential. So you have a lot of installers who are very used to going in and putting up projects on residential and commercial roofs, and then getting sign-off from CFE and the safety check, and then those are up and running within the week. And I think it's a very different kind of project to do that than to go and circle up several municipal or government off-takers to make sure that the PPA, that they are kind of a credit-worthy off-taker, and then to compound that and get several people together who can off-take the power from that contract. There's just a much longer sales cycle, so it requires a lot more patience. And so I think that those are some of the challenges, and that's why we see that as being, I think a few of those might pop up throughout the course of 2014, but it still just remains uncertain as to whether or not that's a really viable business model. It's just one that we see as having a lot of promise if it does get off the ground.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I have a question addressed to Hector, another one. It's a question from Reinaldo Villaseñor. He is asking, does Gauss Energy work on other solar projects at the moment? I mean, did you open the way for yourself to develop more projects now, or are you waiting for the new energy reform to see what the impact will be?
That's a very good question. Because we do have a large pipeline of projects coming from last year. We thought that the game will go to replicate Aura Solar model into the main line, into the interconnection system. So we start developing projects in other parts of the country. But once the legislation or the constitutional change was approved in December, we found out that we should slow down a little bit that process and look and to wait till the regulation will be in place. So right now, that development has been slowed down. We hope that with new rules and certainty on how the things will move, we can we can reactivate those projects. So one thing to consider is that the self-supply and the small production regimes, as we understand it, or the IPPs regimes as we understand it right now, will not be in place in the next month or so. Once the secondary regulation is in place, so we have to fully understand what are going to be replaced for. And once we have that understanding, I think we will reactivate our pipeline.
Okay, thanks, Hector. Clear answer. I have a question now for John. John, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. A question from Manuel Castro. Any impact of the next energy sector reforms expected on the net metering regulation?
Ooh, level of detail that I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, what exactly is going to be included and how detailed the secondary legislation will be, I think, is still a big question. There's a number of laws, but trying to push this through Congress in such a expedited fashion certainly leaves a number of questions as to how thorough and detailed some of this is going to be, and how much of that will then be left into things such as SENACE and a number of the other items that are all part of the implementation program of the reform.
Thanks, John. I see that we've passed 6 o'clock, so it took more than an hour already. I want to end with a last question to all of the three of you. But first, let me tell a short thing about what we're doing. Upcoming events are next week in South Africa. Of course, our trade mission in Mexico, where it's all about now. There are only a few spots left for the trade mission. So if you plan to join us, please contact me ASAP so that I will be able to reserve you a spot in the group. We limit the group to 20 to 25 companies, since we want to have the interaction with the government stakeholders and banks as good as we can. So please contact me as soon as possible. Other events can be, of course, viewed on the website as well. For now, I want to thank you. My email address is here below the email, and I want to end with one question to all of you. John, first to you. What would be your advice to anyone that wants to enter the market of Mexico now?
Well, I mean, I think that, similar to what Hector was saying, right now people are looking to position themselves. I would strongly recommend for people that have been kind of kicking the tires on the Mexico market, as well as those that are looking to come in. Engagement strategies now are very critical. I agree with Hector that the project development will be kind of put on hold until we see the new rules of the game. But things are moving very fast and furious, and understanding the dynamics, the legislation of what's going to be put in place, and who the key actors are. And again, from a macro perspective, I think that this has taken tremendous amounts of political will. It's very important for people to understand the amount of political will this has taken to get to the position where we're at after 50 and 75 years of state monopolies. There's tremendous amounts of vested interests, etc. And so you need to understand who's who and who's thinking what. How that's all going to play out in terms of both at a national level as well as a regional and local level are things that are still to be determined. But this is not, the same can be said for the oil and gas sector. This is not a time to kind of just sit back and watch and see what's going to happen. It's a time to start getting engaged and getting your ducks in a row, so to speak.
Okay, thanks, John. So the outlook is positive, if I may summarize you, but it's key to get the right connections and start building your network now.
Absolutely. It's not the time to sit back and just observe. I would say it's the time to really start putting a game plan in place.
Okay. Thanks a lot, John. Hector, I have a question for you that relates to this. How can people still not in the market become as successful as you are? I mean, you know the market the best of everyone. Is there still room for new players to enter? Or?
Absolutely. I think that there is a great deal of joint venturing and bring experience from the international arena to Mexico and from Mexico to those international players. So I think is as John mentioned, it's a time of engaging into coming to Mexico, establishing, getting the right people to work with. I think that there's a very interesting participants. Mexican participants can bring a lot of value to other international companies. So I think it's a good time to not to engage, not to wait and see, but rather to start doing things in Mexico. And the best way to do it fast and with a more cautious game plan is to try to get together with a Mexican player. We have been in the market for a long time, but there are other participants that are very serious and very knowledgeable about the market. So I think we encourage other participants to look into what's happening. The expectations are very, very, very good one. It's very much exciting times here in Mexico for PV solar development.
Okay, thanks a lot, Hector. That's clear. So it's an encouragement for people to enter now, as I may summarize you.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks again, Adam. As the last one, I wanted to ask, how would you summarize your knowledge about the Mexican market? One of your statements is that that Mexico is Latin America's most attractive PV market. How can the market grow further? What would be what could even improve the outlook?
Sure. I mean, I think that there's a few pieces that still need to come into place. I mean, putting aside the obvious ones that we've covered already, which is certainty within the regulatory atmosphere. I think there's probably the answer is a little bit different whether you're a domestic company or a company who's foreign and kind of looking to come into the market. For domestic companies, it can kind of only get better. I mean, I think that the companies who are already there are positioned well. Obviously, they understand the market, they're close to the off-takers, and they know what those next steps are. And their real challenge is going to be understanding the off-takers and then finding financing for those projects. So, and I think that applies to all project sizes as well. I mean, offering financing tools will really expand the residential market, potentially beyond just those high consumption tariff tiers. Financing for these larger scale projects by really understanding your off-taker, understanding the wholesale power market, and having some visibility into that forward price curve so that you can make a compelling case, and understanding how to kind of structure the debt that you're taking on in a way that you can pay that back based on what you can see in the market. So I think that understanding financing and off-takers for domestic companies is a big thing. The other thing that I would say is that one way that I think the market can get a lot better is just with increased competition and more companies that come in from elsewhere as well and form these joint ventures or start their own companies. I think that will really help the market. It'll drive down prices. It'll improve the quality of the work that's being done. Both of those things contribute to increased market education. And I think that there's a pretty good value proposition for foreign companies to start taking an interest in Mexico. Because the market itself has such a massive potential upside, but also because it's kind of a springboard for the rest of Latin America and a springboard kind of globally for this push towards how to be competitive and make money in unsubsidized markets. So yes, I think that there's really, barring any dramatic unforeseen changes, I think it's only up from here for the Mexico market, and and there's an advantage in getting in early in that kind of a scheme.
Well, thanks a lot, Adam. That clarifies a lot, and it summarizes, I think, the potential and the outlook of the market. It's positive. It's a time to get around there now, and yeah. So please make sure that if you want to join us on our event, contact me, and we will see what we can do for you, and hopefully meet you in Mexico. Yeah, I want to thank our sponsors, which are Jinko Solar, Astrom Technical Advisors, Solar Tech, and our content partner Apricum. Of course, Anna, as the association, as our supporting partner, is very important as well. I want to thank the three speakers of today, John, Adam, and Hector. Well, it was a very professional and very good way to get an insight into the market. So thanks for your contribution. It was a real added value to this session, and hopefully the people get a good grasp of what's going to happen in Mexico. Hope to be in touch with all of you in any future event, and you can find my details on this sheet. Thanks again, and we will send you an email for evaluation and recordings tomorrow. Thanks again.